Bucks, go Bucks. Go Bucks, go Bucks. Go Bucks, go Bucks. Go Bucks, go Bucks. First and goal, gotta tough it out. Get in the end zone and call a hot route. O-line to beat right down the street. To have Humphreys run right underneath. You know it's Bucks ball, we got the hardest D. Bring the pressure to the QB. You know it's routine, we got Hargreaves. Welcome to Tampa, welcome to Gerald. Go Bucks, go Bucks. Reppin' for my team. Go Bucks, go Bucks. You know we want the ring. Go Bucks, go Bucks. Welcome to the Bay. Go Bucks, go Bucks. Tune in with Buccaneer Blade. Bucks back, we can run and toss. Mike Evans looking like Randy Moss. And team is making play on the defense. You can't stop Levante. On my boy McCoy, who you can't avoid. At the Raymond James, you about to feel the pain. If you a Bucks fan, make a lot of noise. If you a Bucks fan, make a lot of noise. Go Bucks.
All right, here we go. Make sure everything's running live. It's a little laggy. Hopefully it'll fix itself. But all right, everybody, welcome back to BucksReport.com with your host, Mr. Buccaneer Blake. And we're going to do it with the Blake and Blake Sports Talk Show every Saturday at 11 a.m. And we're going to be talking about a whole lot today, talking about NFL, Kaepernick, the Bucks, and all types of moves like that. But first, let me bring my Ace Buku, my right-hand man, Mr. Peter H. Blake with the Sports Web. Let me bring him on here. I can't do it alone. There he is. Let's get him in.
What's going on, man? Happy Saturday.
Happy Saturday, sir. So I got my coffee. I'm ready to go.
Yeah, you seem like you're hyped up. I heard you went to the Magic game on Thursday, huh? For Valentine's Day? How was that?
Yeah, I always go. I only get 4 chances to see them. They play them twice in Orlando and they play them twice in Miami. So I usually try to get the one of each. But yeah, it's fun. I was down. You saw how close I was. I was basically right there behind the bench. But yeah, it's a fun time basketball game. Much different experience than the NFL. NBA fans really don't heckle you like at football games. Everybody is kind of, there just having a good time. There's a whole lot of foreigners there as well, being how basketball is, international, really like real international.
Yeah, it's always international, but I think the big story this weekend is All-Star Weekend. Does anybody know who's in the slam dunk contest or even care at this point?
Well, actually, there's 2 Hornets. One Miles Bridges, our rookie, is in the slam dunk contest, and the other is in the 3-point contest in Kemba Walker. And ironically, the All-Star Weekend is in Charlotte. The very
Charlotte. So it's Kemba Walker.
Yep.
Kemba Walker's. I may have to watch that.
Yep, Kemba Walker.
He's gonna try to pull Spud Webb.
Oh, whoa, Spud Webb. That's throwback there, Peter.
I know I'm aging myself here.
No, you're 21.
Yeah.
But as you guys know, it's me and Peter on Saturdays, 11 a.m. It's a little later now. Peter had a rough night.
Just trying to get up, man. Not a rough night. Just trying to get up. So I think we're gonna go noon from now on Saturdays. How about that, guys?
That sounds like a better time.
Yeah,
sounds like a better time. As always, we're on Bucks Report, the Peter Webb and the Sports Web, myself with Buccaneer Blake. But we got our own thing here. We're gonna try to do. It's the Blake and Blake Sports Show. And like I said, we're going to have a nice little intro. I'm going to get all that set up. I just haven't got time to do it all yet. We're going to have a nice little intro and everything for us. I'm not going to be as good as you in sports, Sean Sports, Don, but I'll be second best. I'm cool with that.
well, hey, I'll tell you right now, we definitely need to get some rock in there. Okay. Yeah. We definitely need to get some rock. Yeah. And speaking of rock, or, a rock solid story that kind of broke late last night. Let's talk about this Colin Kaepernick and Eric Reid settlement with the NFL. It's being reported now it's about $60 to $80 million. What do you think of this whole situation? It definitely seems like Colin Kaepernick won this case, didn't expose the NFL, although there's people out there that would say, well, if this guy's sacrificing anything, basically he's sold out. So what say you?
What say me? I have to agree. I have to agree that Kaepernick made out. Kaepernick and Eric Reed, because I think they were both in together, if I'm not mistaken.
Sure.
They both made out. Like they don't have to. He didn't have to give up his body, for all these years through this settlement. People didn't find out till later that he was getting paid by Nike when they came out with the Just Do It thing. That kind of broke out when everybody was in an uproar about not doing throwing away their Nike stuff for sponsoring Colin Kaepernick. But all in all, Kaepernick won and didn't really have to sacrifice too much. But playing in the NFL, I mean, all in all, I mean, you want to play sports, but you're still getting paid for not playing. I think he would rather take that than the other option.
I mean, my point has always been, does he get paid more not to play in the NFL? And absolutely he does. And with this settlement, he most likely is not going to play in the NFL ever after getting that $60 to $80 million. And then on top of it, getting the money from the endorsement deals from Nike. But I think as a fan of the NFL, I would have liked to see if they did collude. I think already with this settlement, the answer is already there for you that they did collude against him. That's why they were willing to settle. So now that that's over with at this point, I think we can just get back to watching football instead of being so political. But honestly, just kind of capping this off, if you will, I wish the NFL would probably try to focus more on domestic violence, try to focus on the image of the NFL, of their players with serious crimes, murders, stuff like that, instead of somebody kneeling. Because I think somebody kneeling, looking at it from the perspective, because, we always do this Peter's perspective on Monday night on the sports web, looking at it from that standpoint, you would like to see them focus more on the serious stuff instead of things like kneeling. Just my opinion.
No, that's a pretty good opinion. I mean, and you touch a good subject there, because there's a whole lot of ways you can go with that. They should focus on other issues like that besides somebody expressing their feeling, which has nothing to do with the NFL. You had to do him with his belief, and social justice. With the way he saw it, it's his opinion. He didn't. I mean, I get it. People want to say he used the platform for it and all that, but to be honest, the issue what's going on in the league is that the league is a business. It's not about sports anymore, and I think they really need to keep things quiet about their own investigations. And people are getting confused between criminal and the NFL investigations. They are not the same. All this is just a business, seeing what the facts are and then dishing out a punishment on that issue. In which a lot of the cases, like Kareem Hunt, it was done in last February, and there was no charges filed. But the NFL is just catching up now, so people there's a lot of information that people don't get and understand the between the two, what's going on, because NFL is not going to file any charges. It's going to file suspensions or fire you, pretty much just like any job with unpaid leave or paid leave and stuff like that. It's just the words are just different. And I think it's hard for people to understand what's going on between the two.
Well, what's hard to understand is how the NFL doesn't want some of this stuff to come out. They don't want a black eye until it does come out from TMZ. And then that's when they worry about it. And again, just to summarize what this whole situation is about, it all goes back to money. If it's costing the NFL ratings, if it's costing them the bottom line, then of course they're going to settle out. And that's exactly what they wanted to do, because they don't want the dirty truth to get out there that the owners did collude. They don't want the dirty truth to get out there that they really don't care about domestic violence unless TMZ picks up on it. They really don't want to get that out there because they want the fans to think, we do care. You don't. Because if you did, you would let the truth come out. And of course, you don't want the truth to come out, and you don't want to have it cost you the bottom line, which again goes back to what? Money.
You want the truth? You can't handle the truth. But that's all.
No, you can't handle the truth on Blake and Blake Sports. I'm your host, Peter Blake, along with Blake Cable. What's going on?
But that's the truth, Peter. They don't want the truth getting out, what happens behind the scenes. Everybody knows what goes on. All the owners talk. I'm sure they all have meetings. All 32 teams have meetings together, and they all probably go just like this. All right, Peter. They said we're all in agreement that we're not going to sign Colin Kaepernick, and we're just going to, not say anything about it. Yep, everybody agrees that they're not going to sign him, and we're going to move forward. But and that part's crazy that you would do that to that man, but you would let Greg Hardy play again.
I don't get it. I don't get it. I don't get it.
You see, like when you make moves like that, you're hurting all credibility. Like everybody, because remember, I don't know if you were at that game when Greg Hardy played here with the Dallas Cowboys. All the Tampa fans were booing him, and you could see the separation from players and him. I don't know if you remember that, Peter, but I remember it like it was yesterday. The whole Dallas defense was separated from Greg Hardy when they went to the huddle, and he was standing there chanting the Bucs fans on when they were booing him after his whole domestic violence thing. And you allowed that to come back to the league, but not Colin Kaepernick for something that he believed, nonviolent, just his opinion on what he thought, and you wouldn't let him back in the league. It's just asinine.
It is. It is. You're absolutely right. With the Hardy case, it's clear that he did something wrong, only got suspended for 2 games, and then when the pictures come out to TMZ, and once again, you know, if you have a sports story and it comes out TMZ, most likely the NFL is going to start to panic a little bit and start to pay money. And that's what it's all about at this point. So with that story kind of closing up and there's more layers to it, I want to get your takes on some of the Buccaneer stuff that's been happening. Namely, you know, of course, we talk about Matt Bryant being possibly the kicker of this team coming in. And then also Donovan Smith going on Good Morning Football, saying he wants to stay in Tampa Bay. And then there's talk about Quan Alexander. So let's break some of this stuff down. I don't know if I ever got your opinion about Bryant being the new kicker of the Bucs. Would you like them to pay the money, even though he's a little bit up there in age? And as Tony Rossi has pointed out, he's missed about 8 games here in the last couple years. Would you be okay with Bryant being the new kicker of the Bucs coming into 2019?
Yeah, I would be okay with that. I mean, at this point, we have nothing set in stone as of right now. I mean, Cario Santos did pretty well, given, you know, the time that he played. He wasn't really put in too many pressure situations because at the time he got here, playoff hopes were all but diminished. But I know he's familiar in this area. I'm sure he probably might still have some real estate here for him. I know Matt Bryant was here for some time. He might welcome to come back here. I don't like the way the Bucs did him at that time when he was gone. So, you know, I'm surprised actually that he would want to come back here. If you remember, his son had just died around the time when we cut him. But kickers, as long as he still has the ability to kick, and Vinatieri's 46 years old now and still able to kick. So I don't see any problem with that as long as he has, you know, he can do what he needs to do. Matt Bryant does have a very strong leg. As long as he can hit, you know, 40 and under consistently, he should be fine in the league. I mean, he might be asked to kick a couple 50-plussers, but I don't really hold kickers too accountable for those because that is a long field goal. But everything pretty much 40 and under, if he can get that, solidify that would have gave us a couple wins over these past 3 years. I mean, I'm sure you would agree.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. You got to agree with that. Look at all the kickers they put in here with the Bucs. They brought in, you know, 11 kickers at that time, 77% accuracy in that time period, 89% for Bryant. It seems pretty easy for the Buccaneers to sign him. If he wants to come back to Tampa, the Bucs should make it happen. And it makes lots of sense at this point, even though there may have been some friction back then. That was with John Gruden, Bruce Allen, you know, those people in power at the time. Now you have Keith Armstrong, who is the former special teams coach for the Falcons. It definitely makes sense to have some type of reunion. And then, like you mentioned before, if he has a house here, it makes sense for him to come back because, you know, that's one less thing you have to worry about if you're the Bryant family. If you have a house here, you don't have to go and buy a house somewhere else. Not that he couldn't, because he's making pretty good money, $4 million. But I was just, I was taken back by how many fans were saying, well, he's too old, you know, kicker. We can go with Cairo Santos. Look, if you have the most consistent kicker in the last 10 years and he wants to play for your team, pay the man.
Let him at least come out and show you that he still can do it. And you forgot to mention that he also kicked in the Super Bowl. Just
right
there.
Right. We won't say that. No, we won't mention that. In the
Super Bowl. Yep.
28-3.
That's not really on him, but
right. That's would be on that defense and the play calling.
Yeah, it was pretty bad. And you did mention Donovan Smith. Before we get off topic, you said Donovan Smith wanted to stay here, and that ties into that too. Donovan Smith said it on the show. I'm already established here. So to me, that tells me he's already bought real estate. So he's already invested in this town, invested in this community. Why would you want to up and leave? And that's what happened with Pierre Paul, when people were talking smack about him, before you learn the details of the facts, people learn details when you get reports before you switch your opinion in. Because remember when people were saying Pierre Paul missed on purpose and lost out on $2 million or $1 million or $2 million because he didn't show up to camp, and then the story later broke that it was because he had to pull his kid out of school and get him set up back into school here in Florida and up move his family. See, there's things you got to find out first.
Yeah, no, somebody says they're interested in the Danish guy. Somebody also says Jan kickers. So I tell you what, let's move on a little bit. Let's get off the kickers. Let's talk about Smith and being the left tackle here. 64 starts for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. You look at the free agent class, not a lot of tackles that you would say you could bring in right away and plug and play. Right. And then you look at the draft process, besides Jonah Williams, maybe Greg Little, not a strong class with offensive tackles. So that's why I think either A, they're going to sign him to a long-term deal, or B, most likely they're going to franchise him because maybe they're not sure about what he brings to the table. He's still inconsistent, although he's 25 years old. So if you tag him, yeah, it's going to be $14 million, but you can get a look and see if Donovan Smith is a part of your future. And because Jason Licht is the general manager of this team, I could see him coming back instead of them letting him test free agency, because there may be a team out there willing to overpay or pay that market value for a left tackle.
Absolutely. There's always somebody out there that's desperate. Yeah, right. Yeah, there's always somebody out there that's desperate and willing to overpay for a need that they need to fill.
Right.
And I think we would, like, a lot of people know how I feel about Donovan Smith, and and a lot of it is just consistency. And I'd be a hypocrite to say the same thing, about, Winston and getting their feet under him and doing what they need to do. And they're the same age. So, that's why I said Donovan Smith probably needs to get with somebody around his stature. That's why I think me and you, the last time we talked, I said Jason Peters is a big left tackle. Possibly they could hook up in the offseason. Peters could teach him some ways to move his feet and things like that. It all depends on Donovan Smith's willingness to get better from season to season. And that's something Licht and them are going to have to figure out. But there is one. You said there's not many, and there isn't. There's only one offensive lineman, and that's possibly I would take him to replace Damar Dotson. And I wanted him since the Patriots traded him from the 49ers for pennies. And that's the left tackle for the Patriots, Trent Brown, that's going into free agency. He's 25 years old as well. He's 6'8", 59 pounds. You want to run the ball, that's the kind of guy I want to get behind and can pass block and solidify a line and not get pushed back. And I think when you say top offensive tackles, and it's really a system thing, and like we got a good coach now that can develop players, because Trent Brown was he went to if I'm not mistaken, Georgia, a little small college in Georgia, and transferred to UF and was drafted in the 7th round. So you can find guys like that you can mold and become average players. I mean, like I told you before, but good coaches make bad players average and average players good. And like I said, with Arians, you should get that kind of production.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. You have Harold Godwin is the new offensive line coach. He's done some good things with the Arizona Cardinals. And you also have Bruce Arians, his system, bringing in all these coaches at this point should definitely help the progression of some of these players going forward. You're absolutely right. Trent Brown, they trade for him for the 49ers. Does well. He's going to get paid big money, so that's why I wouldn't see him going to the Bucs unless the Bucs are going to invest in him. You're certainly not going to pay 2 left tackles and play 1 at right tackle. I just don't see it happening. You're not going to pay them left tackle money and do that. So at this point, you have to decide if Donovan Smith is going to be a part of your future, and I think he will, at least for this year, going forward. And then you can go into the draft, maybe address that in the first round. If Jonah Williams, let's say you want to trade out, because you don't necessarily have to take him at 5 because of all the quarterbacks going up in the draft. So maybe you can trade out, get an offensive tackle either in the first round or in the second round. But at this point, they definitely need to improve that offensive line, especially at the guard spot, especially the right guard and possibly the right tackle with DeMar Dotson. The question will be, will they bring him back? Because, Dotson, he's getting up there in age. He's coming off an injury. He's looked okay, but you wonder if they're going to go another direction, and that may be in free agency. Once again, that's one of those things that those questions are going to be answered on March 13th. And what you're watching is Blake and Blake Sports. I'm your host, Peter Blake, along with Mr. Blake Cable. So with Smith being talked about, Quan Alexander, there's been a lot made of him. Reports are that he may want to command $10 million from the free agency market. I'm not sure if Alexander's worth $10 million, especially coming off an ACL injury. With the money that they got back with Vinny Curry, and we'll get to Curry in a moment and ask you if you were surprised by him being cut, but with that money being saved, do you think there's a possibility of where, because they're going to sign Donovan Smith, that they would let somebody like Alexander go and test the free agency market and most likely lose him to a team that's willing to pay him $10 million? Blake, is he worth that?
I wouldn't say 10 million. Oh, and one more thing before Trent Brown. Trent Brown could play left or right tackle. He played right tackle for the Niners and then played left tackle for the Patriots. So he can play both.
Sure. But are you going to pay him? Are you going to pay him left tackle money to play right tackle? It's a lot of money to invest in the offensive line. I'm not saying it's a wrong thing, but can the Bucs pay that? And will the Patriots allow them to pay it? Maybe they franchise him.
They probably are because he's 25. I mean,
right.
A 5-year deal pretty much seals you up on offensive line, barring injury. You're good at that point. But I mean, I've always been an advocate. If you're going to spend your money, spend it on the front lines. That's where you win games. Everything else is interchangeable. All these young, like Edelman quarterback playing wide receiver, caught one pass in college. He's Super Bowl MVP, so it's a proven fact that these players can be moved in and out. But the one thing that you need to win games is your offense and defensive line. Sorry, I don't want to get off topic, but we go to Quan Alexander. Lavonte David had a hell of a year when he got repaid, and he played great, and he got better. He played great even after the contract, and he didn't get $10 million. And Quan has made some great plays for this team, but there's one thing that makes me not want to say he gets $10 million because they're lackluster in pass coverage. They had a lot of those passes over the middle. That's linebacker depth. I said, and those wide receivers are getting right behind them. I don't know where they're looking at, but they're slipping right behind them in them gaps and making those big third and 7 and 3rd and 9 catches right behind them. So, I mean, our linebacker coverage hasn't been really too great. And, along with the pass rush has gotten better this year, but $10 million, I would like to see a little more production out of that.
Yeah, $10 million for a player that's inconsistent. You're exactly right. What is his Achilles heel? Coverage skills, over pursues. But I'm kind of curious to see what Alexander could bring to the table in this new Todd Bowles defensive system. What can he bring? Will he have that speed coming off the ACL injury? Will they be able to use him on the edge? Will they be able to use him in the A and B gaps to blitz the quarterback? All these questions need to be answered, and you may not be able to get to ask that question because, again, there may be a team out there that's willing to pay that price. Of course, you have Drew Rosenhaus, who's his agent, so he's looking for the best deal at this point. But for me, I'm not paying $10 million for a player that's coming off an ACL injury. If there's somebody willing to do that, go for it. You can always look at that need in the draft or go with what you have with Kendall Beckwith and Noah Spence and Lavonte David and possibly Jack Cichy, who's coming off also an ACL injury. Or you can address those needs in the draft with the likes of a Devin White, who a lot of comparisons, they compare him to Ray Lewis, which is a great comparison. You know what I say about comparisons, they're sort of asinine, but you look at the tape, guy's a playmaker. Is he worth the 5th overall pick? Possibly, and that could become a need if they lose Alexander in free agency.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to compare somebody to Devin Smith, I don't know what he's like between the shoulders up, and that's the difference between what made Ray Lewis, much like Patrick Willis. Sure. And those are things. I know if you've watched my show when I talk about tape and stuff, and a lot of things I say, there's things that you just can't explain. That you guys can look at tape. I could look at stuff and I could tell where stuff is going, just the way people are lined up, or the way their body leans, or the way they lined up one way and lined up another. Those are small things only a veteran or somebody that's a student of the game would understand. So if I mean that kid, the boy we're talking about is very talented. He's very good coming up the middle, blitzing and all that. And much like Quan was when we got him, he was the spy linebacker. He wasn't really the star of that LSU defense at that time, but we got lucky and found that his talents would transition over to the NFL, and I'm sure Kevin White's will as well, or Devin White.
Sure.
Yep.
Sure. And because Jason Light loves to draft LSU linebackers, it would certainly make sense. And look, if Smith is worth the pick at number 5, you take him. But I still think that the Bucs could be trading out of that spot simply because, right, there are so many quarterbacks coming up. There could be teams that are getting desperate. Again, it just depends on the free agency. Free agency is the biggest indicator at this point, and you're going to be able to see what teams address that quarterback need, and the teams that don't are going to get even more desperate. And when draft time comes, that phone starts ringing. You have to start answering that phone.
Yep. I know you said later rounds. One guy I think we can get early in the later round is I think right tackle Risner out of Kansas State. Pretty solid right tackle. That's if somebody down at the bottom of the draft doesn't pick him up. But if he could slip to the second round, I think we can get him much like we did with Donovan Smith early in the second round.
Sure. I mean, there's a couple of tackles out there right now. Greg Little, that brings kind of gets me wondering what they would do. He's another guy. There's also another player from Florida who's highly ranked at this point, could be in that conversation. So look, if the Bucs do trade out of that 5, and I think they could if the right deal is there, then you could see them address that offensive tackle, defensive tackle. I know we've talked about this before. Vinny Curry gets cut. Were you surprised by that? And then if you cut Vinny Curry and you're looking at Carl Nassib and JPP, is the need really, instead of offensive line, defensive and edge rusher in this defense at this point, in your opinion?
Absolutely, Peter. Absolutely. If I didn't say this, we would be right back to where we was 2 years ago, getting rid of defensive line depth and not replacing it with quality and some stability. Vinny Curry was a bandit signing, much like Bo Allen. We were last in pass rush, and we just picked up 2 players that were just on a Super Bowl winning roster. I don't really think people always want to be optimistic, but they weren't really the answer to fix our pass rush needs. We really got lucky and blessed with the signing of Carl Nassib, which I liked that boy since he was drafted. He just needed a few years to get his feet under him, and that's why he wanted to show off the Browns. He had 2 sacks against Baker Mayfield. He just needs some time, and that's what I tell people with the Bucs. You got to give these people time to come into their own. But yes, if we're going to get rid of him, which most likely we probably are going to move on from Gerald McCoy, you have to replace this defensive line. We can't neglect it no more. We've been seeing what not having a pass rush does to this team and in this league. You got to have pass rush. Like I said before, I'll never be mad at investing money in the front 7. That's where you got to win these games. It's ugly drafting offensive lineman. Nobody likes it, but it's necessary. Same thing with defensive linemen. If there's a guy there that's going to put immediate impact and help this team succeed, then do it. There's no question about it. You can find corners. We just found Adams off a practice squad from the Giants. And I've said this before, the Giants beat the Patriots with 3rd-string corners. The defensive line was immaculate.
Yeah, it was immaculate, and you get a pressure, but it starts up front. If you get enough pressure on that quarterback, then that quarterback can't have that necessary 5 to 7 seconds, because once you give that quarterback those seconds to throw the ball, then basically they can pick you apart. Mm-hmm. And you look at this draft overall, it is filled with not only defensive tackles, but also defensive ends. So the Bucs definitely may get some of these players, like a Josh Allen if he slips because of the quarterbacks, like a Clelin Ferrell, from Clemson. Some of these type of players, and Ed Oliver, Quinn Williams possibly dropping, although I doubt it. Maybe a Jeffrey Simmons from Miss State, who had an injury but maybe falling, but still, you look at the tape, very dominant defensive tackle. So some of these players are going to be there, and you wonder once again, would it behoove the Bucs to drop out of that number 5 spot, get a couple extra picks, and fill these needs at the defensive line with a defensive end and a defensive tackle, seeing as there is so much talent in this 2019 draft?
You're right. It's defensive loaded, and I think the Bucks need to clean house right here, especially on this defensive line. That's why I'm so advocating getting Trent Brown to solidify that old line, and then we have to worry about finding a right guard, which you could possibly do somewhere in the draft. There's somebody sitting there waiting to be grabbed, to be had, and fill this line. And there's other stars and this is a name I want you to remember me saying. It's a Florida pass rusher. If he comes out, if he decides to come out, it's Ja'Kai Polite. Coming out of Florida, that boy. Oh, you heard of that name?
Yeah,
you always find these guys. I always be looking. Yeah, coming out of Florida. If he decides to declare, but that boy, his first step coming around the edge is pretty amazing. And what's sad, Noah Spence has that kind of potential too. Noah Spence's only issue and what worried me, and I played defensive end before, so it's having long arms. He doesn't have long arms. If you can't. Yeah, I play defense end. If you don't have long arms, it's hard to get the offensive lineman's hands off of you, and that's really his own issue. He has all the other intangibles, but this Polite kid, I think he can do something if he comes out.
Yeah, I definitely think you're right. He could be a top 15 pick, and it depends on what he does at the combine. If he runs a high 40, then definitely you're going to have him in the conversation, and who knows? You're exactly right, because there is such desperation. Because what do you have to have, Blake, in the NFL? And right now, what you're watching is Blake and Blake Sports. I'm your host, Peter Blake, along with Blake Cable. Good afternoon on this Saturday afternoon after Valentine's Day. And what a lot of teams love is that edge pass rusher. And that's exactly what Polite could definitely bring to the table. So do not be surprised if he runs that high 40 and he does well in those drills and people start to turn on the tape, that his stock could slip up into that top 10, where a lot of people didn't necessarily expect him to go. Instead of mid to second round, he could go top 10 at this point.
Somebody said in the comments, good point. I forgot all about it. Thank you, Shay Rogers. I'm going to post it, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely right.
Dante Fowler will be a blessing. And he should come cheap too.
Well, I mean, he has the potential. He's a lot like the kid we just talked about, good pass rushing skills, top prospect. Believe he went in the top 5. Jacksonville, I think, picked him 3rd overall or something along those lines.
Yeah, he's top 5.
Maybe it was top 5. Okay. So he's a top 5 prospect. Really hasn't put those statistics in the NFL level, but would he be an upgrade over what the Bucs as an organization have? Is he an upgrade over Ryan Nassib? I'm not ready to give up on Nassib yet, but I still think you need more players. And look, if you're playing this aggressive defense and Fowler comes to you in the right price, which again, there may be a team out there willing to overpay for him, I have no problem with going with Fowler in free agency.
And that's the other part too, Peter. I don't think he's going to be overpriced. He was part-time in LA with the Rams. And with defensive line, it's not about you're giving up on Carl Nassib. It's a rotation. It's just like basketball. You have your A and your B guys, because you can't pass rush or rush the whole game. Your legs and your arms get tired. That's a lot of work. But he would become in as a rotational player, much like that's what Seattle does. They pick up a lot of these veteran defensive linemen and stuff, and they have good rotations. And that's what I mean about picking up, keep getting players, defensive linemen, and with good rotation, and we can get guys and get a constant pass rush the entire series, their entire game, so they're not, gassed in the fourth quarter if we're in a tight game and stuff like that. So that's what I mean. If you can get players like that and which would alleviate some pressure in drafting maybe a defensive end so early, you can get something else if somebody falls. So it's all a chess game, Peter, and that's where Mike and Arians are going to have to do the real homework at that.
All right, so let's talk about free agency that's coming up here on March 13th. Who is a player that you think the Bucs should focus on? Should be their first call besides Matt Bryant, because that's one of the first calls I would make. But who's another player, and then I'll give you mine. And I think he is in a Bucs uniform by March 13th.
Tyrann Mathieu.
You stole my thunder, because that's what I agree with too. I mean, that's a big time need. He knows Todd Bowles' system. It's an instant upgrade over what you have at the safety position. And although you have guys like Justin Evans and Whitehead, I think Mathieu coming in here as the honey badger, being able to make those plays in Bowles' system, is an absolute home run. and I would expect it to happen, most likely be one of the first calls they make and get this deal done, no matter how much it costs. At this point, I still think he has some left in the tank. And because schematically he's going to be where he needs to be in this Bulls system, I think it definitely is a perfect fit.
Oh, yeah, it is. It's another match made in heaven coming right back home. And like I said, I think we talked about this before. I don't think the safeties were too bad, but yes, they're very young. Matthews is going to come down in the box and probably play on the tight end, something we haven't had here in quite some time. He can actually teach coverages and schemes and what Bowles is looking for. I mean, there's pluses to it. The question is how much he's going to ask for. And I don't think we talked about that, Peter. Actually, cap. We were talking about cap and money. We didn't talk about where we're actually at. And the Bucks are currently at right now are at 15-9 right now. And we are like 2, 4, 6, 8. We're ninth worst cap in the league right now.
Sure.
And I guess Arians and Light got a big decisions to make here now with all these players, with these expiring contracts that are backloaded. So we'll see how this turns out.
Yeah, I thought they actually had more. I thought they had 23 million, but they didn't. So yeah, they're in a cap situation. They're going to definitely have to do some work. And that's why I think McCoy's going to go by the wayside. Jackson's going to go by the wayside, possibly Dotson and Bo Allen. All these players, I think, may be going bye-bye to free up that cap. And then eventually, once you get all that cap freed up, most likely you'll have about $40 to $50 million. And look, I think this is overblown because every year the NFL talks about and teams talk about how they don't have enough cap space, and yet the cap keeps on going up. Now, good question here, and I asked this to you because you played defensive line before. I had no idea of that. So let me just use your expertise for a moment. How do you feel about Vita Vea, our DT draft pick from last year? Can he replace McCoy? And what if McCoy wants to restructure his contract? Do you continue to go with McCoy in this defense, or do you let him go? What do you say?
It's all about if they I don't want to say McCoy. McCoy wants to stay. I already know that answer. At that $13 million that he's going to receive, is the play going to be worth the pay? And I think we all saw last year that it's not. And it's hurting me to say that, but I have to speak first. I'm thinking as a business standpoint versus the man, Jerome McCoy. And I'm just talking about an athlete standpoint. It's not worth the $13 million. He did give 100%. I'm never questioning his integrity. That is not what I'm doing. And I know you're talking about, somebody made that comment, is Vita Vea going to replace Jerome McCoy? Vita Vea and Jerome McCoy, let's clear the air right now. They are two separate kind of players. That's why the reason he was taken top 5, because Jerome McCoy can pass rush and stuff the run. Had one of the quickest steps off the ball. Vita Vea is a gap controller, a lot like Vince Wilfork, that can maintain a double team without getting shoved 10 yards back. He's done that mostly all last year, is getting double team. And if he's in one-on-one, he will beat offensive linemen in one-on-one. And he's pretty athletic. So he can be an heir to Gerald McCoy. But if you get an addition like an Ed Oliver, somebody who's more of a pass rusher and can still stuff the run a little bit, then you kind of got an Ebony and Ivory effect. You got your run stuffer and you got your pass rusher both inside.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And Vea, when he was healthy last year, which was a big component of his success, when he finally got healthy, got into football shape, he showed that explosive nature to take on 2 to 3 blockers. He made some plays last year, so I think the future is bright. And then with him being in this Todd Bowles system, I think it's only going to get better at this juncture. But for what I'm talking about with McCoy, even if you do restructure, do you think he's a defensive end? I mean, where do you play him? Because you have to play Vea at the nose tackle spot. I'm not sure if McCoy is a defensive end. I don't think he works in this system anymore. That's why I could see him going. Somebody said, where's Sean the Sports Don? Look, I don't know. We'll try to get Sean the Sports Don on here sometime, but this is Blake and Blake show with yours truly, Peter Blake, along with Mr. Blake Cable here on this Saturday afternoon. Of course, definitely tune into the Sports Web and, of course, all the other shows here on Bucks Report. And I cannot forget, and I don't know if you're coming out to this, Blake, but we actually have an AAF watch party for the Orlando Apollo starting at 3 o'clock tomorrow at Ferg's on Central Avenue in St. Pete. So come and get some wings. Come and watch the Orlando Apollos with yours truly, Ray Kennedy, possibly Travis Bailey. The whole let's get all Bucks Report out there. Let's get this done. Right. Let's get Keith Parsons or Keith Larson. Oh, I think he's going back to town. But yeah, I mean, let's get everybody out there, support this, because football season is never over on the Sports Web and on Bucks Report.
Yep.
So, all right. Well, anything else you want to cover at this point? Because I think we covered a lot of the stuff that we really wanted to cover with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and free agency. Tell you what, let's go around the NFL. Are you surprised by Antonio Brown going back to the Steelers owner? And do you think that they can make this thing work between Brown and the Steelers? And, you know, for me, I look at it from the standpoint of they both need each other. The Steelers don't want to get rid of Brown because he is one of the best wide receivers in the league. Brown doesn't want to leave the Steelers, not only because they are talented with J.J. Schuster and James Conner and Ben Roethlisberger, but also, you know, I'm just not sure if there's a better situation for him at this point than the Steelers. So do you think they make this work at this point?
I'm a big advocate for the Steelers team, much as I like the Bucks to be a lot like them with the influx of players that they have in to replace. And I just like the way they run the organization. Now, with me saying that, is the Steelers have done this in the past. They will not submit to players. I said the first one to go out was Plaxico Burress. Thought you were bigger than the team. They moved on from him, found other wide receivers. Of course, they had a couple failures like Lima Swede and a couple other players that they had. Yeah, that's a name.
Lima Swede.
Wow. Yeah, that's a name. That's it. Hines Ward. You find Juju Smith-Schuster. They've let Emmanuel Sanders go. They've let what's the other boy's name? I went to Miami with Mike Wallace.
Mike Wallace. Yeah, Mike Wallace. I mean, you had plenty of receivers there. Yeah.
They go somewhere else and think they can succeed. And,
Santonio Holmes.
Yep, Santonio. Yep, I forgot about that one. Santonio Holmes. So the Steelers' resume shows that they can find receivers regardless of who you are and where you are. So Brown really doesn't have any leverage. No dog in this fight, being 30, and they paid you and they showed they were loyal to you. But then in the end, you want to, all this nonsense is going on. And I don't really know what's going on behind the scenes, what's being said and all that. But, and the players always get the backlash of it because they're the ones that's in front of the camera, not the owners that or the executive offices making all these decisions. So I know there's two sides to every story. There
really is. And you really don't know what the mindset of Brown is because there could be some domestic violence. There could be some situations. And already what you hear, he had some situations with Ben Roethlisberger and the coaching staff. But if anybody can make it work, it's the Steelers because they're so consistent and they are, a man of their word, if you will. They're going to get the most out of the players. And if the players don't give them that, they're going to cut ties. It doesn't matter who you are. They still have Schuster. They have a very good scouting staff that can get players, although Lima Swede is one of those cases where it didn't necessarily work out. And Martavius Bryant, who was talented, just couldn't stay away from the drugs off the field. Right. So, and Johnny brings up a great point. The Steelers are on the hook for $21.5 million. So is there a team willing to not only pay those premium picks because a longtime writer for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, Ed Bouchette, was actually saying Brown would only be worth a 7th-round pick. Now, come on now, Blake. 7th-round pick for Antonio Brown. No way. And then it leads me to my next point. Speaking of nonsense, Jay Glazer actually predicted that OBJ, Odell Beckham Jr., could be traded from the Giants. Out of the percentage of both of these players, who is more likely to get traded, Beckham or Brown?
Dang, you actually gave me a good one I got to think about here, Peter.
Yeah, man, putting you on the spot. It's Blake and Blake Sports. I'm your host, Peter Blake, along with Blake Cable.
Yep. But if I had to rate one higher, it's Brown because I know the Steelers' track record. I know their track record. They will move on from Antonio Brown, especially with that $20 million, and you have no heir to Ben. You still having a running back issue. I mean, we got James Conner, but Well, they can always find players. They're good at that. But Brown moves on, and you said 7th-round pick. That's kind of late. I would predict maybe a 5th and the player back, only because contract. That's why you don't get a 1st-round or 2nd-round pick, is because of the $21 million. You're not going to get it's not going to be a 1st or a 2nd-round pick. And that's just my personal opinion, seeing the way the league does business, and it's the contract that you don't get that high pick, because the Steelers in the end, they're relieved of $21 million. That's really their bonus. And if you still can get maybe a player or a lower round pick, possibly a 5th or a 4th round, I'm gonna say it's going to be probably a 4th round and possibly some cash incentives or a player back. And that's why I think Brown will be the one to move. Well, Beckham is possibly too, with the emergence of Saquon Barkley. Now the light is shift from Giants and the OBJ to Giants and Saquon Barkley. I think that's where the lights changed in New York, and like you said, that's why you probably brought that one up, because the light has now shifted to Saquon over Barkley, and Saquon has a much better attitude than Odell Beckham.
I agree with that, but look, I'm not taking anything less than a 1st-round pick for Antonio Brown. I don't care what his contract is. And if I'm the Steelers, I would sit on him and say, look, you're either playing for the Steelers or you're going to sit out. We're going to keep on fining you for not playing for the Steelers, because I'm not taking a 5th-round pick. I'm not taking a 7th-round pick. With the Beckham situation, it's more likely because they just signed him to a contract extension, but I can't even see that, because again, it comes down to compensation. If I'm the team like the Giants or the Steelers, I'm asking for multiple picks for wide receivers. There are not only just guys, they're not mediocre guys. These are top-notch wide receivers. I got to get multiple picks. I got to get 1st, 2nd-round picks. I'm not doing any of this deal unless I'm getting that. And I don't know if there's a team out there that's willing to give up multiple picks for Brown or Beckham.
So I'm gonna hit you over the head with this one, Peter. I get what you're saying because of that, but here's the proof in the pudding. I said Antonio Brown, yes, top notch. Not disagreeing you on that, but you said you're not giving up anything less than the 1st. All right, let me hit you with this. Then how come Amari Cooper can be worth the 1st-round pick and is a less of a player than Antonio Brown, but Amari Cooper is good, but like I said before, Amari Cooper is still under rookie contract.
You're making my point for me. I mean, come on. You're going to give up a 1st-round pick for Amari Cooper, and you're not going to give it to a proven commodity like Brown? And I get it. He's getting up there in age, and his salary is high. But come on. This is Antonio Brown. Even though he has the Hulk Hogan mustache, even though he looks like Pippi Longstocking on LSD, he's still Antonio Brown. You've got to get this guy's attitude in check, because he's a he's a playmaker, a game changer, and there will be teams out there to be willing to pay that. And if they're not willing to pay the multiple picks, if I'm the Steelers, I keep them. It doesn't make any sense at all. And Johnny says, actually, let's go to Corey, because Corey's saying some crazy stuff right now. Steelers should cut Antonio Brown. They should also trade him to the Bears. And then Deshaun Jackson can go there. That would be an interesting wide receiver combo. I mean, the locker room would be just filled with a diva mentality. I don't think that would happen with the Chicago Bears. And then Johnny goes, Peter, you're exactly right. Steelers won't eat that $21.5 million. They will sit on Brown on the bench list, which is exactly what they did with Le'Veon Bell. Oh, yeah, by the way, Blake, there's still a possibility the Steelers may transition tag Bell. What do you think of that possibility? And then possibly trade him away. What is the likelihood here that the Steelers transition Le'Veon Bell? They end up keeping him. You keep Bell. You end up keeping James Conner. You keep Antonio Brown and J.J. Schuster. What is the possibility of keeping all these players in the building at this point? What if Schuster was right, that they basically are the Kardashians and they got to stop this nonsense?
There's always a possibility, Peter. And the Steelers would only do that if it somehow benefits them. Of course, maybe do they get the money back that they get fined for all the time? That's a possibility. And then that'd be a reason why you keep them, because, if you're paying them out the transition tag or paying Brown their $21 million, but he's giving you $15 million of it back in penalties, I guess, yeah, you could hold on to him in that case. Anything's possible. It's all about how you're going to benefit from it. So I'm sure they're not going to sit on that money and then not have any type of plan. The Steelers been around and these Rooney's been around a long time, so I'm sure they know what they're doing. Oh, there is something we didn't touch on though, Peter.
Yes.
And this is a big one. We might lose Adam Humphries.
I mean, the cat, and you look at Sporadic, because I was looking at some of the numbers, they actually value him at $10.3 million. Are you paying $10 million for Adam Humphries?
We've never.
I love Adam Humphries. I go on record here. Humphries is the Wes Welker of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He is the Julian Edelman of the Bucs. He's the most consistent factor. He runs great routes. Second in receptions last year was 76. But are you paying him $10 million when you have Chris Godwin and other young players and possibly cheaper options in John Brown? Are you paying Adam Humphries $10 million, Blake Cable?
Well, hopefully he's not going to ask for $10 million. Humphries does deserve to be paid. And it's a lot of it's our fault why he's not getting more production out of it, because we don't use him other ways like other teams would use him. We don't scheme ways other teams would use them. So that's a little bit of our fault. And that comes back to coaching. Adam Humphries shows he has the talent to maybe get 900 yards receiving or maybe 70 plus catches. He's shown he's consistent. He can do it. We don't game plan that way. So it's hard to say that he's not going to be worth that because we never given him the chance. But then you let him go to New England or somebody who would value and use the player for what he's good at, and you see the value in the player, and we just let another guy walk that should be still in Tampa Bay. But to answer your question, the only way we would pay him $10 million is you have to move on from Cameron Brate. Now something's got to give there. You already got OJ Howard, and OJ Howard can run, block, and pass catch. Brate is only good at pass catching. So that would be the real answer. We have to trade Brate and get maybe a mid-round later pick, and then give Adam Humphries that money, and then you still got Justin Watson coming up in the win and stuff like that. So there's a lot. Like, they have a big offseason this year, and this is really going to show Jason Licht, and I think this really is going to solidify if he keeps his job in the future or not. This offseason is big. Somebody
said, did he say Pippi Longstockings on acid? I absolutely did. That's what you get here on Blake and Blake Sports on Saturday afternoon. I'm your host, Peter Blake, along with Blake Cable, as I'm trying to make everybody laugh out there. He does, man. Look at the pictures. Hulk Hogan, Pippi Longstockings on LSD. Not a good look by Antonio Brown. Rike, who is a longtime texter here, haven't seen him in a while. He says that Adam Humphries averages 4 catches a game at 10 million. Johnny goes, you know what? Adam Humphries is also top 5 at his position. I don't know. I could see them, cutting Brate, maybe using that money towards another position, possibly Humphries. But again, I mentioned this last night on the Sports Web, which was a late edition. So thank you very much for the support last night on Friday night of moving on from Humphries and getting overpriced by a team. Although it would be disappointing to lose Humphries, then you could replace him with the John Brown, who, by the way, gives you that speed option that most likely you're going to lose with the Deshaun Jackson, and he may come at a cheaper price.
That's always an option. We'll see.
You're just taken back by that, aren't you? You're speechless because that was such a great scenario that you didn't think about, and that's what you get here on Blake and Blake Sports on Saturday afternoons, live on Bucs Report. So anything else you want to cover, or do we just wrap it up here and let these guys watch their AAF games and comment and like all the shows here on Bucs Report? We ready to end this? Yeah,
we can end this. We done a good job covering everything.
Oh, we have. And I'll tell you what, if you guys want to comment on this, like it and share, it's Blake and Blake Sports. Again, I'm your host, Peter Blake, along with Mr. Blake Cable, and we will see you out at Ferg's on Central Avenue. Blake Cable, you going to be out there or what?
You said Sunday at 3?
Sunday at 3.
Yeah, I can do that.
All right. Blake Cable is going to be there. Ray Kennedy may be there. You fans should be there. It is going to be a great watch party at Ferg's on Central Avenue and St. Pete. Orlando Apollo, Steve Spurrier coaching, all the fireworks, all the wings you can eat. Join me tomorrow at 3 o'clock. Again, this has been Blake and Blake Sports. I'm your host, Peter Blake, giving you something to think about. And Blake Cable, we'll see you later, all right?
Yep, see you later. All right, Peter.
All right.